Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Liz and this is Let's Get Lizical, where we do everything card making, and today we are doing something a little bit different. I had a request back in June to do a baby card that was Hobbit themed because my sister's best friend, who is my honorary little sister as well, had a baby shower to go to for another friend of hers, and they were doing the baby's room in the Hobbit theme, which I think is kind of fun. So she wanted a card that went along with that theme, and I came up with this concept of this little hobbit door, and the door is going to say, "Welcome, little one." The footprints that I stamp on the cobblestones outside of the house were a last minute ad. They are part of the Oh Baby set from Simon Says Stamp, which is I think the only baby set that I have, potentially. But it's the one that I use for every baby card that I do. The Oh Baby and the Welcome Little One are perfect. But anyway, I thought adding the feet would be a cute little moment of this little baby coming into the household, and still within the theme of hobbits because they kind of look like little hobbit feet. But anyway, so as far as I know, there's no stamps out there for that, and even if there was, I probably would not purchase for one card, so I decided to draw it. It's a very simple concept, just a round hobbit door with some grass set into the hillside, so there's going to be dirt and then grass and then this circular door. So I took some die cuts that I had, and then I took my circular nesting dies, and I just kind of traced those out. I do have compasses and stuff like that for drawing circles, but this was just easier because it was on hand. And I drew the straight lines for the wood planks of the door, and then for the stones that border the door, I kind of went from the center of the circle and then radiated out. I didn't measure them at all or try to get them even or anything. I just drew lines to either side for the stones, and that was it. It's, again, a fairly simple concept, and if you guys are interested in this as maybe a digital stamp set, maybe I could draw one up in Illustrator and add it to my shop. I'm probably going to be going a little bit more digital soon anyway, just because it's more feasible. It's a bit easier, and I think as long as you have a printer, you can print your own images, and they are resistant for the alcohol ink markers, so you can color on them no problem with an inkjet printer, and there's no bleeding or anything. The only problem with it is that you obviously can't stamp it in different colors, but I think if I offered this set, I would do one in black and then do another one in a light gray that you could print out, and kind of do what I did here, where when I do quote unquote no line coloring, I usually use a coordinating fine liner, because fine liners are usually also good for alcohol markers. They don't bleed or anything, the ones that I have anyway. They might all be that way, but just test yours on a separate piece of paper before you start coloring anything. But I usually use a coordinating color in a darker shade or a similar shade, and then color it in with my alcohol markers after. It just helps it, again, look like a no line coloring image, and I like the way that looks. I didn't want to trace everything in black and then color it in, but again, that is something you could do if that was a stamp set that I wanted to provide digitally. Again, let me know in the comments if anybody is interested in that, and I can work on that for sure. But I'll do more store updates again soon-ish. I'm just probably gonna do a craft and chat video again, where I kind of update you guys on some things, but I also need to think through my plan going forward, especially with the tariffs and whatnot to the US. It's getting a little ridiculous, so I might be changing the structure of my business, but we will see how that goes soon. Again, I need some thought on it before I actually sit down and discuss it with you guys, but again, probably going to be moving to a more digital format with my branded items. So anyway, back to this card. This card video is mostly coloring because that's what took me the longest time. This card from start to finish took me about an hour. I did it in like 2 sessions just because I had to run out and do some errands in between. But again, like overall, it was an hour's worth of filming. And again, most of that time was just spent coloring. I am coloring the grass right now. I colored it all in like a solid green, and then I'm just adding like stippling for texture, and I'm just kind of making it a little bit darker around the edges, a little bit lighter towards the door, just to like help lighten up that focal point, but also add in some contrast. And I'm going to be doing the same thing with the dirt. I'm going to be coloring it, adding some texture to it. Same with the stones. Actually, I had a lot of stippling on this card. I thought I went a little bit too crazy with it at some one point, and I was like, okay, maybe it's a little bit too many dots on this. But I really like the way that this card turned out. It looks great. And I just, I had a lot of fun creating this card. It's nice to do custom cards sometimes where you're, basically giving out your own artwork. And this is a very simple image to draw. Again, I just used 2 circles and a ruler to draw most of this. And like the rocks I freehanded. You just want to draw somewhat circular shapes that can be a little bit more square at times, but it's, again, super simple. I'm pretty sure anybody can draw this up, no problem. And it's a very like quick-ish card. Again, it took me like an hour, but it was mostly coloring. So if you're really into coloring, this is a good card for you. For the details on the door, I only had to add 2 hinges and a doorknob, which you don't really actually see much of after I stamp the welcome little one sentiment anyway. But I just added a bit of a darker color in between to make it look like separate panels, like wood planks. And then I'm taking a fine liner and just drawing in some wood grain. I do this quite often on Christmas trees and stuff like that. Anything that needs to be wooden texture. I very lightly touch the paper with the marker and just kind of let it jump across the paper in a sense. Just like add that like broken texture, because you don't want it to be solid lines throughout. It makes it look a little bit more natural when you don't. And then I'm adding in a bit of shading around the door, as well as like little nicks in the wood and stuff. So I'm just adding like little darker points that come up and down from the edges to make it look like it's maybe cracked a little bit. It's a bit of a weathered door. And then when I did the stones around the door, I did trace them as like basically like squared off blocks, I guess. But then when I went with my fine liner, I rounded off those edges to make them look more like stones. And then that, like in the gaps, I added a little bit of the darker marker and gave it a little bit more depth and texture to it. I'm going to be coloring these with my cool gray markers. I think I used 3, 5, and 7 for my Copics. I'm trying to use these up before I get too much into my Olos, just so that, I don't have a bunch of markers that I'm not using anymore. I'm trying to use up what I have first, which I've been doing with some of these markers for years. There's still a few markers that I've had since I graduated college, and I graduated college in 2010, and so some of these markers that I have are 15 years old. They still work. So as long as you keep the caps on them and take good care of your markers, like they'll last a really long time, especially the colors that you don't use as often. And I have a bunch of ones that I go through, like the grays I tend to go through quite often, reds, greens, the Christmas colors, these like periwinkle blues, because they're my favorites to use as well. So I do go through certain colors fairly quickly, and then there's other colors like pinks and purples that I don't use as often, so those colors tend to last a bit longer for me. But for the stones, I'm just kind of doing like a center out shading, so like the outer edges are darker than the inner edges, just like, again, make that center the focal point, and adding a little bit of dot texture to it with the darker marker, and then I'm going to help blend that out with the, looks like the C3 again. and I like to go back and forth when I do that. I'll color in all the bricks, add in the texture, and then go over them again in a lighter color just to help blend it out and make it look a little bit more natural, a little less stark. For the ground, I'm just adding a bit of a lighter brown. I am not much of a landscaping person when it comes to drawing, so I kind of stuck in my comfort zone for the amount of like grass and stuff that was on here. I debated on adding plants and bushes and whatnot to either side of this walkway, but decided against that just because, again, I like didn't want to spend a ton of time on this card. Like, I already spent an hour on it. And again, I'm not like super good at the landscaping. Maybe I should practice that a little bit more. But we just left it pretty plain, and I'm just like, I colored the whole bottom area. I didn't want to have to go around all these rocks. So the rocks are kind of like a grayish brown color, and then I'm kind of using a colorless blender to help lighten them a little bit and make them look a little bit more like stones and a little less like they just blend into the background. And then I'm probably gonna add a little bit of texture to those as well. I'm gonna go around the door a little bit more and making the stones a little bit darker here. Sometimes I do that because, like, once you color something and let it dry, sometimes it's not exactly what you're looking for. I wanted a little bit more depth and texture to these stones, so I'm just going over it again with the dots and again with the overall color. And then these couple of like random defined leaves that I added around the door also needed a little bit more contrast because they kind of blended in. So I went over those again. Here I am adding a bit of dot texture to the ground again, so it looks a little bit more natural, a little less flat, and a little bit more texture to the stones to make them again a little bit more natural. And then I'm just adding a little bit more darkness around the edges here on the ground just to make that like walkway look a little bit more like it's popping out. And then I just kind of like scribbled some color between the rocks. I didn't want to go solid or anything. It just, again, added a little bit more texture to the card. And then I'm going to cut it out with this dye from, I think it's Penny Black. I always forget where it's from. But recently I have been using the Honeybee Deckled Edges frames. This one's a little bit more textured, which I kind of like. It gave that little bit more rustic look to the card. So once I have that cut out, I am debating between the Nina Desert Storm and a white card base. Originally I wanted the Desert Storm, but it didn't make the panel pop as much as I wanted to. And then I kind of went back between the white and the Desert Storm, and I decided to go with the white because it made that panel pop. And I didn't want all of that coloring to get lost in the mix, so I did go with the white. I think it was a good decision. Let me know what you guys think. Should I have gone with the Desert Storm so it was a little bit more tonal, or do we like it on the white? Let me know down in the comments. But as usual, I get excited about assembling the card and I forgot to stamp. This should be done before you assemble. It just makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more even. Right now I have 3 strips of foam tape on the back, and it does make it a little bit more difficult to stamp, but we make it work. So I'm just gonna stamp on the welcome little one and like 2 sets of the feet, and then that's our card done for today. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and let me know your thoughts. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe because I'd love to have you here, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content or updates or any fun stuff we have going on, because we do that sometimes. And then maybe soon I will do my rant and store updates, but again, I just need a little bit of thought. But anyway, thanks again for joining me for today, guys, and until next time, bye!